In her book, she says the White House was broken. This after 2 years along a president who wasn't housebroken. But she only realized this after she stopped getting paid to defend it. But like Jake Tapper's book, it's a new genre of Biden tell-alls that should be subtitled, "I had no idea because I'm severely retarded."
Think Karine Jean-Pierre had perfected the graceful dodge armed with a binder and a polished smile. Think again, because when Greg Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly stepped up, the White House press room felt more like a late-night roast than a daily briefing. Gutfeld was firing off punchlines quicker than Karine could flip a tab, while Megyn sliced through the spin with the precision of a truth-seeking scalpel dipped in espresso. And Karine? She was blinking like someone just hit her with a question that wasn't in the script. What exactly did they say that scrambled her talking points into a meltdown? Oh, it's savagely entertaining.
Talk to the Megyn Kellys of the world, who have literally voted until this last election, which put me over the edge on voting more for Republicans. But literally now I've voted in 9 presidential elections. God, I'm getting old. And I voted, it was 4 and 4 Dems, 4 Republican votes up until I voted for Trump again this last time. So it was 5 Republicans, 4 Dems. I've been a registered Democrat, I've been a registered Republican, and now I've been a registered independent for 17 years. That's what an actual political independent looks like. Not like somebody who worked for 2 Democrat administrations until they got the stank of desperation all over them, and she ran for the hills trying to pretend she knows what independent.
If sarcasm earned medals, Greg Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly would be standing proudly on the Olympic podium, gold around their necks, mix in hand. And this week, their verbal jabs zeroed in on none other than Karine Jean-Pierre, the press secretary, who handles tough questions like their live grenades: pull the pin, toss it back, and hope someone else dives on it first. With every quip and cutting remark, Gutfeld and Kelly turned the briefing room into a masterclass in pointed comedy and political theater.
Those applications you gotta fill out. What, you think I meant vaginas?
Ew.
Disgusting people. But now everyone says she's incompetent and lazy. You know, after they called me racist for saying that. That's not why I'm racist.
Nope.
Let's be real, Karine's press briefings have started to feel less like informative sessions and more like avant-garde performance pieces, where giving a straight answer seems to be completely off the script. Enter Greg Gutfeld, the reigning king of cable comedy masked as political commentary. He didn't just critique her latest appearance, he dismantled it with the precision of a stand-up comic on a roll. It was like watching improv night at a dive bar, only Karine wasn't in on the joke. And the audience wasn't laughing with her, they were laughing harder with every dodge, deflection, and dramatic pause.
But really, they're just jealous. These colleagues also played along with the hoax, saying that Joe was doing 75 one-arm push-ups while finishing the New York Times crossword puzzle all before breakfast. They're just pissed she beat them to the publisher's office and to the bank. I expect to see more of these books because of the lifeboats these rats will use to try and escape the shipwreck of the past 4 years. So KJP is now an independent because apparently pretending to be apolitical sells better than admitting your last job was gaslighting America.
Greg's monologue of mockery didn't just poke fun, it transformed Karine into a tragicomic figure, stumbling through the wreckage of logic like a Shakespearean character lost in a modern-day farce. Picture someone trying to explain quantum physics while swatting at a swarm of bees. That's the chaotic energy Karine brings to the podium. And Greg, he cranked the volume to 11, threw on a metaphorical fedora that read Sarcasm CEO, and doused the already smoldering spectacle in pure, premium-grade gasoline. The result? A fiery blend of comedy, confusion, and commentary you couldn't look away from.
That's how bad the stink is when one of its worst offenders is fleeing this rancid armpit called the Democrat Party. So should we buy her book? Well, only if your family and friends have a sense of humor. It'll make a great gag gift. You know, like fake dog or rubber vomit. Only the stench here.
Meanwhile, Megyn Kelly, ever the expert at delivering sharp critiques with a polished smile, took a more refined, surgical approach. While Greg stormed in swinging a comedic sledgehammer, Megyn arrived with a scalpel in hand and a high-powered microscope in tow, ready to dissect every flimsy claim with clinical precision. Her words didn't just cut, they sliced through the noise, exposing the most eye-roll-worthy absurdities Karine tried to pass off as legitimate commentary. It was articulate, brutal, and oddly mesmerizing to watch unfold.
And her fans are already sharpening their crayons. And it's just what we need, a tell-all from the woman who spent 2 years telling everyone that Joe just had a cold and not rigor mortis. If the title hadn't already been taken, it should be called Art of the Steal. KJP also says she's leaving the Democratic Party. I say God bless her. Not many people have the patience to wait in a line that long.
Megyn Kelly approached Karine Jean-Pierre's latest press briefing like a forensic pathologist handed a frog with 3 livers, fascinated, baffled, and ready to document every bizarre anomaly. She didn't just critique Karine's handling of the facts. She spotlighted the entire performance as a masterclass in political absurdity. If Jean-Pierre were auditioning for the lead in a satirical reboot of Clueless, White House Edition, she didn't just land the part, she gave the performance of a lifetime. What really set Greg Gutfeld into overdrive, think toddler meets double shot. Espresso was Karine's surreal attempt to explain inflation as if it were some quirky new TikTok challenge. Gutfeld, visibly trying to suppress laughter, walked viewers through what he mockingly dubbed the press secretary's guide to financial fiction. In this alternate universe, skyrocketing prices are spun as signs of a booming economy, and a shrinking dollar is simply getting beach ready for the summer. Greg launched into a parody segment, fully channeling Karine's trademark delivery, long-winded tangents, circular logic loops, and those dramatic pauses that seem to suggest something profound is coming only to pivot to something entirely unrelated, like referencing climate change when asked about gas prices. He wrapped it all up with sarcastic applause, declaring her the reigning champion of turning a simple yes or no question into a 15-minute maze of confusion, contradictions, and lingering regret.
Karine Jean-Pierre reinventing herself as an independent. This from, it's everywhere, but this is just from the New York Post write-up, that she claims she's no longer a Democrat. She's coming out with a book, a memoir, hyping, says the New York Post, a, quote, broken Biden administration. They go on to say that it's a tell-all she's working on now, and it's going to be a look inside. Independent is the name of it. A look inside a broken White House, outside the party lines, due in October. Hachette, which is publishing it, says Jean-Pierre did not come to her decision to be an independent lightly.
Megyn, true to form, chose the high-ick takedown, no shouting, no theatrics, just pure precision. It was like watching an etiquette instructor calmly explain why someone slurping soup with a fork should be permanently uninvited from polite society. Her critique wasn't loud, but it cut deep. She laid out a mental slideshow of Karine Jean-Pierre's greatest hits. If PowerPoint slides could roll their eyes, this would have been the moment. Top-tier phrases like, "Let me circle back to that," "We're working on that," and the ever-legendary, "The president has been clear," were dissected like outdated memes that forgot they weren't funny anymore. "The president has been clear," in particular, has evolved beyond a catchphrase. It's become the universe's inside joke, echoing into the void of ambiguity. By the time Megyn was done, Karine hadn't just stumbled, she'd metaphorically tripped over her own binder of talking points and fallen headfirst into a spotlight of satire. You didn't need direct quotes to feel the burn. Megyn's tone did all the work, part disapproving professor, part dry-humored stand-up comic, and 100% no nonsense. But Greg Gutfeld wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. He followed up with a reenactment so surreal it bordered on performance art, featuring a literal goldfish in a miniature blazer, cast as Karine. The kicker? The goldfish gave shorter answers, dodged questions more effectively, and even earned applause.
In this book, she may focus her ire on figures aside from Biden. Quote, she has served 2 American presidents, Obama and Biden. She takes us through the 3 weeks that led to Biden's abandoning his bid for a second term and the betrayal by the Democrat Party that led to his decision. The tease goes, and she's going to regale us with a hard-hitting yet hopeful critique defining what it means to be part of the growing percentage of our fractured electorate that is independent, why it can be worthwhile to carve a political space more loyal to personal beliefs than a party affiliation, and what questions you need to ask yourself to determine where you fit politically. You've got to be.
In case anyone missed the punchline, Greg Gutfeld graciously stepped in as translator-in-chief, decoding Karine Jean-Pierre's bureaucratic jargon into blunt, everyday language. For example, we're prioritizing the American people becomes, we're prioritizing not taking responsibility for anything ever. Watching Greg, you'd think he was holding a decoder ring forged in the fires of government doublespeak, turning polished pressroom fluff into stinging clarity with every turn. Megyn Kelly, ever the tactician, zeroed in on Karine's uncanny ability to link 5 unrelated talking points into a single response that somehow circles the question without ever touching it. She compared it to trying to assemble IKEA furniture using instructions in Pig Latin with half the screws replaced by bananas. And yet, Karine marches on, briefing after briefing, with the glassy-eyed optimism of someone either blissfully unaware or expertly unbothered by the chaos swirling around her. Even Karine's wardrobe became fair game. Greg joked that her blazer selection process must involve spinning a wheel labeled dystopian librarian and futuristic DMV manager. Megyn, with a single arched brow, observed that when your outfit is more coordinated than your message, it might be time to re-evaluate the priorities. Then came the visuals, Greg's favorite moment. Out came the chart, clearly whipped up in MS Paint, proudly displaying Karine's approval to answer ratio. It wasn't pretty. The line hovered at 0, with the occasional blip labeled answered something by accident, a comedic gut punch wrapped in Technicolor cringe, courtesy of the Gutfeld graphing department.
Republicans hate her. She's not in any position to be a connector of our two-party system, and assuming she could be is just ego. It's so good. They're all ripping on her, some by name, saying how dumb she was, how she's a joke, and literally nobody's buying her ability to be an independent connector who somehow is going to heal the partisan breach. Stu, back to my original point when her soundbite was playing of how those were all lies.
Megyn followed up with her signature brand of refined, razor-sharp wit, likening Karine Jean-Pierre's communication style to a malfunctioning GPS that just keeps repeating, recalculating even when the car's parked and the engine's off. It wasn't just a jab at confusion. It was a full-blown critique of what Megyn dubbed an anti-information strategy. In her view, Karine might be making history as the first press secretary whose briefings actively decrease public understanding, a reverse educator, an anti-clarity innovator. But it wasn't just the content under fire, it was the craft of evasion itself. Greg Gutfeld took the concept and ran with it, claiming Karine had elevated the dodge to an art form. This isn't just spin, he said. This is Cirque du Soleil levels of distraction, next level smoke and mirrors. He described her wordplay as verbal jazz, so improvisational and disjointed that even seasoned jazz musicians would lose the beat. Megyn, with her ever-composed delivery, added that Karine's cadence resembled someone who had memorized a briefing binder, phonetically sounding fluent without understanding a word. She even floated the theory that we may be witnessing the debut of a rogue AI press secretary, glitching its way through policy updates with a soothing tone and a hard reset every 5 minutes. Even their expressions told a story. Greg mimicked Karine's strained smile, equal parts forced confidence and dawning dread, like someone halfway through a sentence realizing they left the oven on.
I have to say goodbye to Karine Jean-Pierre. I'm sorry, guys, but she's going. It's like, this is the way it's gonna, it's the one sadness of Trump winning, because let's face it, we're gonna miss her a little bit. I kind of missed her word salads. In fact, I'll start with the word salads just so you too will be feeling the pangs that I've been feeling. Here's a little montage of some of the best / worst of Karine Jean-Pierre at the podium.
It is hard for us to keep up with this president.
What I see is a strong, resolute president. We're seeing these deep fakes. these manipulated videos.
By the way, used to make beer brewed here. It is used to make the brew beer here in this fire. Oh, Earth Rider, thanks for the Great Lakes.
Is there any possibility that the president would end up pardoning his son?
At one point, Greg Gutfeld launched into a wildly theatrical, borderline deranged fantasy in which Karine Jean-Pierre was suddenly managing something as fragile and timing-sensitive as a restaurant. But this wasn't just a light jab. No, Greg fully committed, slipping into her signature, overly measured cadence. "Your waiter will be with you shortly," he began, straight-faced. Once we've circled back on the appetizer strategy, confirmed enter-E alignment with senior kitchen stakeholders, and concluded a comprehensive consultation with the Sous Chef Coalition, by the time dessert was even floated as a possibility, Greg imagined the poor, imaginary patrons gnawing desperately on their laminated menus. No one received food, but somehow every table left feeling stuffed with confusion, unmet expectations, and a side of intellectual indigestion. The only thing served hot was the chaos. Then Megyn Kelly stepped in, as effortlessly as someone lighting sparklers in a cathedral. With her signature calm, she imagined Karine being asked for directions by a lost tourist. Well, Megyn began with mock-serious gravity. Direction is a social construct. What one defines as left may, in the Northern Hemisphere, symbolize a westward progression depending, of course, on the rotational orientation of your personal trajectory. She continued, but we don't want to get ahead of the data, we're still analyzing the map's core deliverables. The fictional tourist remained utterly lost, but now also existentially disoriented, unsure whether they were in need of a GPS or a philosophy degree. Karine hadn't just failed to guide them, she'd ushered them into a rhetorical escape room, locked the door, and thrown away the key, and yet, not a voice was raised. Greg didn't need volume, his humor was a metaphorical chainsaw ripping through a ballet recital, jarring, over the top, and unapologetically destructive. He didn't merely mock, he disassembled, leaving the crumpled debris of logic twitching under the stage lights.
She realizes she was carrying water for a man whose brain was as wet as his pants. Remember, this is the same broad who stared America in the face and said this.
Comments were made in that report about that, obviously about his memory that we don't believe lives in reality.
80's the new 40, didn't you hear?
He is as sharp as ever. They are cheap fakes video. They are done in bad faith.
And it's not true, right? The president wasn't wandering.
Is anyone in the White House hiding information about the president's health or his ability to do the job day to day?
Absolutely not.
He's the president of the United States. You know, I can't even keep up with him.
Megyn, by contrast, delivered her critiques with the poise and chill precision of a Bond villain sipping champagne mid-hostage negotiation, graceful, unbothered, and terrifyingly composed. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her weapon was venom, not volume. Every word was a velvet dagger, razor sharp, elegantly phrased, and aimed with such surgical accuracy that her target didn't even realize they were bleeding until the damage was done. Each barb came wrapped in a smile, each sentence laced with just enough irony to draw a wince and a laugh in the same breath. By the time she finished, the room felt colder, frosted over by her unflinching tone, yet somehow also scorched by the sheer intensity of the critique. It wasn't just brutal, it was beautifully brutal. The kind of sarcasm you'd want to frame, if only it didn't leave emotional scorch marks behind. Together, Gutfeld and Kelly didn't just dismantle the briefing, they composed a symphony of satire, riffing freely like jazz musicians who had long since tossed the sheet music. This wasn't about politics, it was about spectacle. A live, slow-motion collapse of coherence, with Karine trapped beneath the weight of her own overly engineered vagueness. Greg eventually mused, half joking, half serious, if maybe Karine's briefings weren't press conferences at all, but high-concept performance art. Maybe the purpose wasn't clarity, but confusion. Megyn didn't dispute it. She even offered a new genre classification, bureaucratic absurdism. Think Veep, but stripped of self-awareness, humor, or plot, just an endless feedback loop of scripted sound bites and spiraling logic. recited with the conviction of a Shakespearean actor and the direction of a GPS forever stuck on recalculating.
Sciences. I don't have anything. I don't have anything. I don't have anything. I don't have anything. I just don't have anything. I don't have anything. We don't have anything.
Okay, we could have kept going because let's not forget when he thought that the dead Congresswoman was alive. Where's Jackie? She was just top of mind. She was top of mind. That's what Karine Jean-Pierre tried to tell us. And the obsessive note reading, right? She could not do the job without reading for the first 2 years of it. She got a little better on that towards the end.
Even the Chiron writers couldn't resist joining the roast. Greg's team flashed a banner that read, "Press Secretary delivers masterclass in evasive rambling, an instant classic." Meanwhile, Megyn's show went with a more minimalist touch. "What even was that?" followed by a perfectly timed, exasperated sigh. If press briefings were an Olympic sport, Karine Jean-Pierre would be on the balance beam of bafflement, executing elegant rhetorical flips and mid-air logic twists before landing squarely on confusion. If ever there were a moment that deserved a sarcastic slow clap, this was it. Greg wrapped his segment with a highlight reel of Karine's greatest hits clips of her most puzzling answers, all set to circus music. Sad trombones groaned, clown horns honked, and as the final punchline, the screen froze on Karine, mid-word, blinking rapidly like her internal teleprompter had just crashed with a fatal error. Then came Megyn's mic drop moment. No theatrics, no raised voice, just a subtle lift of the eyebrow and the dry, almost amused observation, "This is who's supposed to be keeping the American people informed." And then that infamous smile, sweet on the surface, but sharp enough to cut glass. The kind of smile that says, "Bless your heart," in the most devastatingly Southern way imaginable. There was no debate. No shouting match, just a ruthless tag team of satirical precision. Gutfeld threw pies, Megyn threw shade, and Karine. She kept twirling in verbal circles, perhaps hoping the sheer dizziness would eventually pass as forward motion.
What she's referring to, Link, is the fact that she's black and she's a lesbian. Like, this is what the left celebrates. That's her history-making role that she hopes everybody will find inspirational. Like lesbian children were growing up all over the country thinking, "I'm never going to be press secretary because I'm a lesbian." I mean, it's just so. What are we in 19?
In the arena of political commentary, this wasn't a bloodbath, it was a 5-star satire banquet, and Karine Jean-Pierre wasn't just the reluctant guest of honor. She may as well have been the main course. Greg Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly didn't go in with malice. No vendettas. They went in because, honestly, it was just too easy. Like watching someone enter a spelling bee and confidently spell cat with a Q. At a certain point, it's not cruelty, it's muscle memory. By the time their segments wrapped, the audience wasn't merely amused, they were united in collective confusion, a kind of shared mental whiplash. Because when a public official's response to a straightforward question feels like decoding ancient runes while being chased through a hedge maze by a bear, something has clearly gone off script. And yet, we press on. Gutfeld and Kelly, ever the satirical sentinels, stand ready, mockery locked, sarcasm chambered, waiting for the next dazzling display of bureaucratic beat poetry disguised as a press briefing. And Karine, she'll be back at the podium, binder in hand, spinning phrases like riddles, somehow making clarity feel like a conspiracy theory.